Hello and welcome to the Necromundown. Today we're talking about rules and why you don't have to use all of them. Necromunda has a lot of rules. Some would say too many rules. That's subjective, depending on whether you like lots of rules. It has a rule for everything. The thing is, though, is that just because Necromunda has a rule doesn't mean you have to utilize it, within reason.
Sure.
When we say that, we're not talking about base rules. Now, obviously, to be very perfectly clear, your gaming group can do whatever you darn well please. If you feel like a ballistic skill check would be far better served on a D10 system, you're allowed to do that. That's outside the scope of what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is that Necromunda rules are made up of kind of modules. This was kind of sparked by looking at the Age of Sigmar 4 previews, and they talked about, well, you plug in the battle tactics module, and then you use Kairos.
You won't shut up about that.
It's bad. Necromunda is perhaps unintentionally set up in a similar vein. You have the basic core rules about how the game functions. So, for example, a ballistic skill, a movement, a weapon skill, your stats, your willpower checks. But not all the mechanics in the game have to be used in every campaign you play. And in fact, I think we would recommend that you don't do that.
I agree.
You brought up a great comparison, which is that Necromunda in this way is more akin to an RPG.
Mm-hmm.
So using an example, if you've played Dungeons & Dragons, copyright Wizards of the Coast, don't sue me. If you've played Dungeons & Dragons, there's the core rulebook, and there's the player's handbook, and the Dungeon Master's book, whatever it's called, DM guide.
There's actually not a core rulebook in D&D. There's a core rulebook in Pathfinder.
I hope that net crack caught on camera.
Me too.
But D&D also has lots of other supplements. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a more recent one, but I haven't played D&D in a very long time. Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Yep. I said more recent one, editor. That was less recent.
Witchlight.
Witchlight. Wild Beyond the Witchlight, was that what it's called?
Yeah, Wild's the Witchlight.
The Tome of Finneban's Tone of Dragons.
So, yeah, Tome of Dragons. Hell, there is a Rick and Morty supplement.
I talked about supplements you might want to use.
Oh, my bad.
Now, in the main rulebook, there is something like, your player has 6 stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, da-da-da-da-da. You kind of have to use that if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons. But if, for example, Xanathar's Guide to Everything introduces a new species of new player race, you don't have to have that in your campaign. One of the things we've just talked about, and what actually sparked this discussion, was the Necromunda Apocrypha. Mm-hmm. So that is both the Necromunda Apocrypha, which is a rulebook, and the Necromunda Apocrypha, which, plural, the plural of Apocrypha is Apocrypha. I hate this so much, which are the free online articles released by a Warhammer community to do things like what we just talked about with the Whispering Weapons. Mm-hmm. Previously, the Mutant Outcast gang was on there.
Yep.
There's been things like Apocrypha doesn't technically include the things in White Dwarf, but we're going to include that in this category anyway.
Agreed.
Because it's non-book rules, basically. Let's call it that. Supplementary rules. Mm-hmm. The Bad Zones Enforcers, which we're going to be talking about after Delok, I think, were in there. Just because an Apocrypha introduces a rule or mechanic doesn't mean that you have to use it in your campaign. You need to have a discussion amongst your group and amongst your arbitrator, or arbitrators, plural. What rules are you using and from where?
Exactly.
Now, in our group, we play a very whatever, everything goes campaign. We clearly delineate stuff we're not using. So like we said, this one, because we had 4 new players, we're not using alliances. Those are just banned. We're not using alliances. We're not using... It was mostly just alliances.
Sure.
Because we used a modified house favor system for our catch-up mechanic.
Right.
But we have the rule where, if it's out there in Apocrypha, go get it. If it's on the trading post list, go get it. You don't have to do that, though.
Right.
And in fact, if you're just playing out, we very much recommend you don't do everything goes.
Yeah. If you were a brand new DM having brand new players, I wouldn't say every book in the system is available. I would say core rulebook, maybe one more, go from there.
Core rulebook and your house book is probably the way to start. Leave out weird things in the apocryphas like Sump Sea battles or whispering weapons or the Dalak special spiker stuff that lets them explode people's heads or anything like that.
And there are exceptions because technically the enforcers are in an apocrypha.
Yes.
The White Dwarf. Then it should be available to be used because it's a gang. It's a separate gang.
Yes. Well, though, I mean, not necessarily.
That's true.
You could say that, no, if you have an enforcers player, if you want to, that it's just Book of Judgment, Book of Judgment enforcers. Establish that early so no one is confused. If you are using apocrypha rules or side effect rules, make sure everyone in your group has access to those rules at all times.
Yep.
The worst thing you can do is say, I can do this thing. And the opponent goes, I'm sorry, what?
Yep.
And then you pull out a book or a White Dwarf article that they don't have access to.
Yeah.
Book less so. White Dwarf article or an apocrypha that they just didn't think about. Necromunda is not Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering, the point is kind of, especially in something like Commander, the point is to build a deck using all the cards and finding ways that they interacted that your opponent doesn't necessarily expect.
Right.
Necromunda can be like that within its systems, but the idea of trying to find all of these auxiliary sources and Frankenstein them into something weird
Or busted.
is not really the point of Necromunda. Unless you make it the point of Necromunda, which is perfectly valid to play.
Yeah,
That's kind of what we do. Like, because...
To an extent.
To an extent. I mean, we have gentlemen's agreements to not make busted stuff, but we do funny stuff. We had a guy played a Slave Ogrins gang, and then he played them as football players just hucking grenades super far.
Yeah.
Which is not technically how they're written to be played, but he figured out you can do that, and that's a fun way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, and he did it very well. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's how you want to play with rails off, everything's go, by all means do so. The main point of this, the main thrust of this, is communicate that amongst your group before anybody starts list building.
Definitely.
Otherwise, you don't want to have a bad time because somebody found a White Dwarf article from 1994 or something.
The new edition was made in 2017.
Okay, fine. 2017 and 1994 are basically the same thing.
Okay.
I've listened to Gen Z. The Zoomers told me. We wanted to give examples of some of the rules that we thought might be best cut if you're just starting out or if you're looking for a more simple game.
Okay.
I'm going to start with one that I think we both agree on because we both don't use these, which is the alliance rules.
Yes. They are simultaneously overly complicated and overpowered.
Overpowered, maybe, yes. Only in the sense of if someone's using them, y'all better use them.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So we haven't discussed alliances much at all.
No.
And that's because they don't really find a place in our campaigns. That's for our purposes, that's more of a narrative reason. Every Necromunda house, House Escher, House Goliath, is subservient to a great house, which is basically a more powerful house of rich folks. And in each of the books, the House of Books, there is a little lore entry on that house, and you are allowed to petition that house for favors. In addition to the greater houses, each of the gangs also has a close working relationship with one or more guilds or syndicates. These are things like, so for example, the Corpse Gathering Guild, the one that takes all the corpses and turns them into corpse starch.
Yeah.
The Dalak, which we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, has a great relationship with the Psyker Smuggling Guild because that's kind of their thing, etc., etc. All of these guilds and houses give you benefits to using them, and you can petition them for aid. The problem is, more so the alliances than the house favors, is that using the alliances just gives you free stuff.
Yep.
And the rules are not very well written or balanced for that.
Nope.
So, for example, the Corpse Gathering Party, the Corpse Gathering Guild, if you ally with them, there is a wonderful upside where you get to sell corpses for credits. There's a downside where if you don't, you lose a guy, they get slaughtered. But the main problem is that it also adds the Corpse Harvesting Party, which is not the Corpse Grinders Guild, by the
No.
way, or Corpse Grinder Cults, by the way. This is just the actual what they're supposed to be before they got all corned.
Yeah.
It adds that party to your gang. The problem is that it's just a bunch of free models.
Yeah. The alliances as written, nothing costs any credits, doesn't increase your rating, anything. Because there's not even any credits associated with the models that you get for free. They did add later in the
Book of the
Outcasts what those models would cost if you were to use them as an outcast gang, but that's not rules as written.
And things since then that have come out don't have those points. So, for example, the Paladin Enforcers got the ability to add Paladin Companions by allying with the Imperial House, which makes sense narratively for them more than anyone else. The problem is those Paladin Companions have disintegration guns with Sever, which, by the way, is the thing that if it deals any injury roll at all, just kills. But they have no points, so you don't know how much they're actually worth.
Right.
Now, you could say that Necromunda is all about narrative, that there's no points in balancing. The points don't matter at all, but we find that's not really true. Yeah. There's a reason everything has credit costs, and for these guys to not have credit costs, even though the credit costs in Necromunda are sometimes a joke.
Yeah.
Let's be generous. The fact that these have none at all makes them a little weird to play with.
I agree.
The house favors and subplots, which is not the alliances, but the ones for your direct overarching house, are a little less imbalanced. And are kind of a baked-in ketchup mechanic, which is how we use them.
Yes.
But their quality varies wildly with the gang.
Yeah.
And certain gangs don't have them at all. So, squat. Basically, any non-main 6 gang doesn't have these.
Yeah, I think there's the main 6, and then Chaos gets one specific for them.
Yes.
Other than that, I think everybody else doesn't have one.
Right. So we often choose not to play with alliances.
Right.
For us, it's also a narrative thing where we like our gangs to kind of be the lowest of the low, just like scrabbling for survival. They don't have the attention of any of these alliances, of any of these powerful things. That's a huge choice. If you're just starting out, we recommend maybe skipping that one.
Yeah,
you're not really missing. You're not missing anything integral to Necromunda with the alliance system.
The next one we wanted to talk about was the law and misrule, the good guy, bad guy dynamic.
Outlaw versus law-abiding?
Yeah.
This one's a little weird because Law and Misrule is the name of the campaign from that Book of Judgment.
Right.
It introduced some mechanics such as law-abiding and outlaw. Now, those we do think you should always play with. But there are other things in there that you can kind of take or leave.
Yeah, so outside of Law and Misrule, the campaign, basically the only thing that it affects is who you can hire and your trading post.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
And those, I think, are important for it.
Yeah.
Because, like, Chaos are always not law by. You just said it 17 times.
Outlaw.
Outlaw. Chaos is always outlaw. The police, I guess, can be either one.
Yeah, they're not always... Enforcers are not always law-abiding, which is...
I can't think of any of the gangs that have to be law-abiding.
Cawdor has to start out as law-abiding. You can choose to get outlawed.
Yeah.
It's weird.
With your redemptionists.
Yes.
But other than that, I think it's pretty much up to the gang creator.
The reason why we mentioned maybe leaving that out is because the rules are kind of scattered and weird and hard to find, and they keep changing.
Sure.
This is one of the major things that changed with the most recent core book. Previously, there were 2 different trading posts. There was a trading post and then there was the black market. Now it's just all one thing. The items on the trading post either have a rarity value or an illegal value. There are supposed to be things in there about how buying illegal items can make you an outlaw gang, even if you were previously a law-abiding gang. There's not a lot of downside to being outlaw as much anymore.
Not really.
You get -1 to your trading post roll,
which is not a huge deal.
Which is
but
not
it can affect your rolls.
It can matter. It does affect the types of bounty hunters and hired guns and dramatis personae you can hire.
Sure.
It does also mean you can sell folks to the guilders and bounty hunters better.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Honestly, what we recommend is just using what's in the core book, kind of ignoring Book of Judgment for most things. Because it has contradictory information, and outside the Law and Misrule campaign, which is an entirely different thing, most of it's not particularly useful.
Agreed. Another one of the ones, which is not necessarily one that we completely ignore.
It just doesn't come up a lot.
It doesn't come up a lot, and when it does, it has a feels bad mechanic to it, which is capturing and selling to the guilders. And there, it can be disappointing when that rule isn't in effect, because there are some things that very much affect it. See Talak, which we're doing soon. It can feel very thematic to have a model captured by your opponent, and you have to try and get them back through either a scenario or bargaining or trading or whatnot. But it can also feel really bad when you either don't have the option to get them back or fail, and you just lose a very, very important model.
Yeah.
The way that it works is on the lasting injuries table now. It used to be just a thing that can happen. Now it's on the lasting injuries. There is a chance that the model can be captured. Then they roll a dice and they have a chance to escape, blah, blah, blah. If they are captured, the next time you have a chance to do a challenge, you have to challenge for him back, or the guy that is captured could just be sold and be gone forever. All of his credits, all of his weapons, everything.
The opponent who captures your model has to give you the opportunity to do the rescue mission to get him back.
You have at least one chance.
Right. Unless they are an unsanctioned psyker or they're outlaw gang, and then you can just sell them immediately.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We used to pretty much never play that way. Now that capture is such a lower chance, I don't feel that is as much of a feel bad. Because
that's true.
Because it's such a lower chance to be captured. Multiple things have to go wrong at once. Now that they've changed capture to be such a lower chance, it's really not that much more common than an actual death. Like a 66. It's a little more.
True.
It's like it's 2-3 pips more.
Yeah, I think it's 3, and then they have a chance
to
escape.
And then you have 50% chance to actually get captured, not counting things like a skin blade.
Sure.
Now that the capturing happens a lot less than it used to, I feel like this is one that you should just play as written.
That's fair.
Because it's so uncommon. Several things have to go wrong at once. You have to roll the capture. You have to go down, roll the capture,
not escape,
and then be unsanctioned psyker or outlaws. Like ding, 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 ding.
True.
And it also kind of ties into actually having an effect on being an outlaw, because like they said, there really isn't too much of a negative in a lot of ways, and that is supposed to be one of them.
That's what we call a callback, ladies and gentlemen.
Do we? So that one is one we didn't used to play with, but in our more recent campaign where we actually used the new capture rules, we kind of started actually... Now, nobody ended up getting sold to the guilders immediately.
Correct.
Because almost always, when you sell a model to the guilders, you get half their credit cost, barring some special rules. Usually, the person who had the model captured will go, well, I'll give you 75% of the credit cost, because they get their model back cheaper. Or they might just say, I'll give you 100% of the credits cost.
Yeah.
And unless you're being a douche, you're probably going to sell for that, because that's more than you're getting selling to the guilders, and you want that sweet, sweet cash.
It's true.
Depending on how campaign's going, if you really need to like kneecap an opponent and you capture their leader and they're like in first place, and it's like, nah, take him out behind the shed and old yeller him, and to the corpse grinder guild he goes.
Yeah.
So that one is an example of one that we previously would have recommended, maybe kind of ignoring. Nowadays, I say play it as is. I think it's as valid a narrative tool as the dreaded 66.
Fair.
And in our campaign, I don't know, 10 people have been killed by the 66 and none of them captured, so...
Good point.
I know what the lasting injury table says, but I also know what actually happens.
A lot of 66s.
So much death. The last one, and this one might be a little contentious, is that you don't have to allow or use everything that's in the trading post.
Okay.
Again, discuss with your arbitrator. If you are an arbitrator, look at what's on the trading post and decide what kind of game you want to be running. There's one very common one. We haven't talked about house rules yet. Most common one. This is a very common one. There is a piece of equipment called the armored overlay. No, a blade of armor.
A blade of armor.
Yeah, it's called something different. A blade of overlay.
A blade of overlay. Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. It's 25 credits. It increases your armor save by 2 until it gets hit, and then it increases your armor save by 1, and then it gets hit and it goes away. The problem is it doesn't actually go away from your fighter card. Somehow this blade of armor regenerates in between rounds.
Yeah, for free.
It's only 25 credits. It's rarity 7. It's so stupidly good.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't banned it entirely. What we did is we actually just made it limited because, it's a blade of armor. So if it takes a hit, it should fall off and it doesn't grow back. That implies something far more horrifying than what the trading post
Only
is.
mutant gangs can use rules as written in Blade of Armor.
Just goo. That's a small example. We tweaked it. But there's other things like, so for example, on the trading post at illegal 13, there are cursed weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically a heretic Astartes bolter is in there. It's implied to be.
Yeah.
If you don't feel that that's appropriate for someone in your gang to find, because it's like illegal 13, but it's not actually that hard to roll.
Yeah.
And from a gameplay perspective, the sudden introduction of cursed is always dangerous.
Yes.
Cursed is a keyword that if you take a hit, just a hit, not a wound, make a willpower check or go crazy. You can decide that that's not something that should be in your campaign.
Yeah.
It's kind of like some folks in Dungeons and Dragons saying that this is a low magic campaign.
Yeah.
Or there are no tabaxi in my campaign. This is only humans and elves and dwarves.
No cat girls.
No cat girls. No lizard people. No sentient friendly kobolds. Whatever. You're allowed to do that with the items on the trading post.
Yeah.
Like you're allowed to say, okay, no one in this hive has access to a multi-multa.
If only we would say that.
You got to be careful about it, especially in regards to how that interacts with house lists. So, for example, Vansar can buy a multi-multa at game creation because it's Vansar.
But can't get a multi-melta off the trading post. I didn't.
You're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Microwave. You can make the decision not to allow those things. For most of the basic weapons, I wouldn't really mess with those because most of those, with a few exceptions, are fine.
Yeah.
The ones that are really good, like a multi-melta, is 180 credits, and you also need Suspensor to not suck.
Yeah.
By the time you get there, other things have progressed.
Previously, in the last book, before the trading post had been rewritten, there were things like the Bone Sword, the Boning Sword from Corpse Grinder Cults. Ridiculously overpowered. At common, for some reason, everybody took them, and they took them off the list. That means that you can do that.
Yes.
You can take something that is very, very common and kind of broken and either adjust it or remove it entirely.
Yeah. If something's becoming a problem, either just because lack of fun or whatever, you don't have to have it in your campaign.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of the esoteric weird things in the book. Like, they're fun, but it's a lot of things that, it's kind of odd, are too cheaply priced for the level of weird that they are.
Yes.
Like, you can find, apparently, in Necromunda, it is easier to find a robotic suit that slowly takes you over and transforms you than it is to find a multi-melta. One of these is just produced by the Imperium. The other one is apparently a relic of the past, and yet they're not that different in credits cost or rarity.
Fair.
And that's just a problem with game mechanics. But you can fix that, or change it, or leave it alone. Like, you don't have to change it, but you can do that. The power is within your hands, is what we're getting at here. You can mess with things. Just because something is in a book does not mean it has to have a place in your campaign. Now, we do recommend being judicious in your decisions in this regard.
Sure.
If you're an arbitrator, check with your group that that's the game they want to play. For example, maybe you're envisioning a low-tech campaign where a multi-melta is something that no one in this hive is getting. A las gun is rare. Like, everyone's running around with cheap reclaimed auto guns and pistols. That's fine. Double check everyone in your game wants to play that.
Right.
And the bigger changes you make, the more you're going to start affecting base level gang usefulness. So be aware of that. And that's it. So just to recap, reminder that the rules in Necromunda are semi-modular and entirely made up. Welcome to Necromunda,
I was going to make a Whose Line joke.
where the points are bad and the rules don't matter.
Yeah.
No, sorry, where the rules are made up and the points don't matter.
There you go.
Yeah, because you can change whatever you need to change and don't be afraid to.
Yeah.
Especially don't be afraid to not use certain entire books or sections of books. And definitely don't feel like you have to buy every single White Dwarf or read every single Apocrypha on a piece of paper just to play this game.
Yeah.
It's not like Warhammer 40,000 or Age of Sigmar, where if they print it in a White Dwarf, it's rules legal, and you have to be prepared to deal with that. It's not a thing in Necromunda.
No, not really.
World's your oyster. We'll see you next time, probably talking about the last of the house gangs we haven't covered. Delaque. House Delaque. Get your sunglasses on. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Okay, you want to bring it up?
Sure. Well, I just said the last one.
Okay, I'll do a pocket.
Okay.
I mean, Cody can edit them however he wants.
It's true.
He can swap it around so that I look like I'm standing on my head.